Welcome to Apple Cottage. This is Sandy. Today I'm making chicken broth, and so I thought I'd bring you along, show you all the things that I do to make it, and really some of those tricks. When you get a recipe from somebody and you go exactly what the recipe says, and it just doesn't really quite taste the same as that person's, that's because all cooks have some little tips and tricks and secrets, and they don't always write those things down in the recipe. But today I'm going to go through and I'm going to show you all my tips and tricks so that you can make a wonderful, smooth, perfect, clear chicken stock. Because that is the basis of so many things. A lot of times people make chicken broth and they're going to make chicken soup, which is good. It's great. It's good for you. Or they're going to make a stew. But what about adding it to stir fries? Adding a little bit of the liquid to your mashed potatoes, adding it to gravies. There is just a myriad of things that you can add it to. So today we're going to talk about chicken broth. We're going to talk about the tools, and we're going to talk about everything that we're going to add to the stock. So let's do the tools first. First of all, we're going to have a cutting mat. This one is brand new. It's made for chicken. A lot of times I'll use my wooden cutting board, and I just got a new bamboo one for Christmas, and I haven't used that yet. But today I'm using one of these. It's flexible, it works good, and it's very disposable. The second thing you're going to need is a very good knife. I like a well-balanced knife. It's almost as important to me as a well-balanced cup of tea. Side note, look at this cup of tea. Plant Mom, that's me. Is that so funny or what? I actually bought it. I was going to give it for a gift. But I just couldn't give it away. It was so cute. Now this is your most important tool. A stock pot. Now mine has copper on the outside, stainless steel on the inside. It's very good at keeping the heat very even. One thing you do not want ever when you're making stock is an aluminum pot. If you don't know if your pot is aluminum or stainless steel, look up the manufacturer. If you still don't know, do not use that pot. Because a stock should be clear. It shouldn't be cloudy, and aluminum has the tendency to add a cloudiness to it. And I honestly could make a video on why you should never use aluminum pots and pans and aluminum foil, and maybe sometime I'll do that, but that's more a rant. And so if you have to borrow a stainless steel pot, a good balanced pot that will evenly distribute the heat is just a wonderful pot to have. It's a great investment because you're going to have it for the rest of your life. It's not like it may be a little spendy at first, but when you look through the next 50 years, that was a pretty cheap pot for you to buy. The next thing you need is a strainer. This is a stainless steel strainer. Don't use a plastic one, okay? Residue. That's the key to that. And at one point, we'll need just a little strainer. Now, if you don't have one of these, you could use a wooden spoon. And when we get to that part, I'll talk about it more. Now, today, we're making chicken stock. So, of course, we're going to use chicken. And this is chicken feet. Crazy, weird, but it really adds some good flavor to a chicken stock. We're also going to use the neck, the back, and the wings from a whole chicken. We're going to cut that up. The other thing we're going to add is spring water. We're not going to use our tap water. And the kind I like to use is this. Joe and I did a lot of research before we started buying these because Gillette water is horrible. Don't let anybody tell you anything different. It's horrible. The taste is disgusting. And that taste will interfere with your stock. So you want to use some spring water. And that is rated number 3 in the nation for the best water, and it's the top one that we can find where we live. We're going to add the fundamental trinity of vegetables, and I did a video about that. I'll link that below. Those are onions, celery, and carrots. And when the video shows when I'm cutting them up, I'm going to talk a little bit more about why we use them, what percentage of each of those vegetables we use, and why. So I'm going to move the camera, and we're going to cut up our chicken, and we're going to start. And while it's doing a little bit of stuff on the stove, we can come back and we can cut our vegetables. Here is our chicken. These are all the chicken feet. Chicken feet are really weird. It makes you almost want to paint their fingernails. It's so weird. We don't have to do anything with that. That's just going to go right into our first parboil. Now the part of the chicken that I want is this back part and these wings. The rest of the chicken I will just cook up for supper tonight. Okay? So I'm just going to take it, breaking apart that wing. A thing to remember when you're doing stocks, fat doesn't add any flavor to your stock. So if you find fatty deposits and stuff, you can just cut those right off. It's not going to do anything to add to flavor. Okay? And so I'm just throwing each of those things into the pot. In fact, I'll bring it right over here. I'm going to put all those chicken feet in there. I know it's a crazy whole idea. Chicken feet, crazy. Now I bought this chicken whole. You know, it's all wrapped up in a package. No neck in there. I don't know how that's possible. I mean, there's a section here that they didn't cut off, so I do have some of it. And so I'm going to just feel in here so I can feel in between where the bones are. And sometimes you can just break that apart. See right there? And I'm looking for it on the other side. Let me do a little bit of a cut. Now there are people that like dark meat and there are people that like white meat. There. I'm going to cut that right off, so we're saving that meat in there. And I'm just going to pull that and rip that up there. Use my knife. This is why you need a good sharp knife. I'm going to come around here. Just cutting. Always be careful when you're using sharp knives. I'm going to throw that right in there. And since I'm cutting, I'm going to cut this part right here, and I'm going to cut this part right here. So this is my breast. Do you see that? Which is really a nice size for the size of chicken it was. And then we have our legs and our thighs. And I actually want this whole part right here too. So I'm just going to cut around here, breaking, so we can get through those joints. So that way I have breasts and legs and thighs that I can cook up later tonight. Breaking. I'm just going to cut around that also. You know, if you did this for a living, you'd get so good and fast at it. See this part right here? I don't want that. If you had a whole chicken that you bought and there was gizzards and hearts and livers, don't put those in your stock either. They sometimes can give it a weird bitter flavor, so you just don't want to do that. So now we have all of our meat in our pot. I'm going to just rinse my hands off a second, grab the water, we're going to pour some water in there. Now at this point, you could use just tap water, because what we're going to do next is we are going to do what is called parboil. Every chicken, it doesn't matter if you bought it at a farmer's market, you bought it from the farmer, you bought it at the store, all chicken has stuff on the skin. It's just the facts of life, and you don't want that stuff. So what we're going to do is called parboiling. So we're just going to cover it enough to cover the chicken. We're going to turn it on the highest temperature you have on your stove. You're going to bring it to boil, and as soon as it boils, you're going to turn it down and let it simmer for 2 minutes. Then we're going to strain all of that water off. We don't want any of that water. We don't want it interfering with our taste of our stock. It'll take any bacterias or anything like that off of the chicken. And so that's going to be our next step. So I'm going to fill this up with water and put it on the stove. I put it on the stove on my big burner. I'm filled it with water just so it's about a ½ inch above the top of the chicken. I'm putting it on high, and I'm going to put a lid on it because I want it to boil as fast as it can. So I'm going to let it boil. As soon as it starts to boil, I'm going to turn it down and put my timer on for 2 minutes. And I'm going to let it simmer for 2 minutes, and then we're going to dump it. While the chicken is starting to boil, I'm going to cut the vegetables up. So we have onion, we have carrots, and we have celery. Now the celery I had to buy at the store. I can't store that long like that. Trick, break that right there, pull it, and you get a lot of those strings. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take all 3 of those. Oh, that one I missed a little bit of dirt. And I'm going to cut those ends off, just because they get dry, and I'm going to throw those away. And then I'm just chopping them. Now, if you've watched my video on the fundamental Trinity of cooking, these are the 3 vegetables. These are the basis of fabulous meals. And again, I will link that below. Now the idea is I want to have 2 parts onion, 1 part carrot, and 1 part celery. So I'm just going to set that to the side because I think that's probably enough. I am going to cut the ends off the carrots. I don't peel fresh carrots. That's personal preference. If you're buying them in the store, they weren't organic, peel them. Of course, peel them. Your carrots and your onions can store way into springtime. In fact, I had onions that I was still using in August because they store so well. And especially if you get you grow onions that are specifically made as good stores. I leave the outer shell on my onions after it dries. So if your hands are a little damp, you can really peel a lot of that layering off. And that's just a little trick. If you have dry hands, it doesn't really work as well. I'm going to rinse my hands off right there. I'm going to peel that off again. Now some of it you can't get all the way down, and when you cut, you'll be able to get it like this one. The rest of it just doesn't want to peel yet, but that's okay. So I'll rinse my hands one more time. A note I wanted to say. When I was done with the chicken and I'd put the legs and the breast in the refrigerator, I took my cutting board and I washed it very well with soapy water right away. I washed my knife right away, just so any of the bacteria that may have been on my cutting board or my knife was gone. So when I'm cutting my onions, I'm doing the tops off, of course. And then I'm just going to peel into it a little teeny bit and see if I can get that other outer skin off. I don't want to waste any onion. I don't want to throw away parts of it that I could use. Now, a funny thing. You can make a coffee with these skins of your onions. And you can make a broth by adding these skins and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's just amazing. You have to Google it. Sometime I'll do a video on it. I found an old Jewish cookbook one time, and it had recipes using these dry, the part that you would throw away. But it used to be that nobody threw anything away. They used every single bit, and you can use it for dyes. So we have a beautiful onion. I like to cut it in half. Sorry, I'm going to have to rinse my hands one more time. I got some skin on there. Oh, the other thing I changed, I got a new towel because I didn't want any chicken bacteria on my towel, so that went down into the wash machine. If you hold it at both ends, so you got your thumb on one end, you got your finger, your pointer finger on the other end, and you just bring your knife in between, you won't have that slippage that sometimes you have when you're doing the edges of the onions. And then you turn it, and I'm just chopping. Now the pieces can be, dime size. It's totally okay. But what I need is 2 parts onion, 1 part carrot, 1 part celery. I'm going to have to stop for a second. I have to check my pan. The chicken is just about to start to really boil. See this gray matter here? We don't want any of that. This can cause bad flavor. It can cause bacteria in there. It can cause cloudiness. So that's why we're using the little strainer. If you don't have one of these strainers, use a wooden spoon. But we don't want this ever in our broth, our stocks. So I just take that and we want to get all of that gone because we want a clear broth. So it's doing a good boil, so I'm going to turn it down to low. I'm turning my timer on for 2 minutes. And I'm just going to get the rest of this gray matter out of there. My timer went off at the 2-minute mark. As you can see, I strained as much of that gray matter off. Makes your stock much clearer and a much better flavor. So I have my stainless steel strainer in the sink, and we want to get rid of all of this water. So it's just slowly draining out. Shake it a little bit. I'm going to put the pot in the sink, and I'm going to dump, actually there's a little bit on the side, so I'm just going to rinse that off. Because I don't want any of that in my soup. I want my stock to be so clear. Okay, we're going to put that back in there. And at this point, I need to add my water. To this, I need 4 quarts of cold water. And of course, I'm using spring water. So this jug is about 3.5 quarts. And so we want it cold. So I'm putting that on there. Then I just need about 1/2 quart. I'll put the vegetables that I already have cut. Now when you're making a broth, you never want to add salt, because I am going to let this, I'm going to bring it to a high boil. As soon as it gets to the high boil, I'm going to turn it all the way down to low. And it is going to simmer at least 3 hours. I want the level of the water to go halfway down. If I added salt, it would become more salty. A trick when you're making stocks. If you want your stock a little sweeter, you're going to add another carrot or 2. If you want it a little saltier, you're going to add more celery. So I got that much of my onion cut up. I'm going to just stop the video while I finish cutting up my 2 onions, and then we'll start again when we're over on the stove. I have our stock on the stove. I have it on high because I want to bring it to a boil as fast as possible. As soon as it comes to a boil, if there's any gray matter that comes up, I'm going to just take that off with my strainer. And I'll show you how much I got off of that when it was just parboiling. But I'm going to just watch this. I'm actually not going to put a lid on it again. I'm going to let it rise the temperature by itself so that it gets to a boil. Automatically turn it down to low. And then I'm going to let it simmer for at least 3 hours. I want the liquid to go to half. Then we'll be able to go farther and we can strain it. Now, don't ever put a lid on this. Now, when you're doing beef broth, and I will do a beef broth one of these days, it's much more involved, and you are using the lid on part of it. But as you can see, I have the chicken, celery, carrots in here. And one of the other secrets, I'm not going to stir this. I'm just going to let it simmer. About every hour, I'll just take my wooden spoon, just go through it one time to make sure nothing is sticking on the bottom. But I want a very clear soup, and I don't want very much disturbance. So I'm going to just shut the video off. When it gets to the simmering part, I'll do just a little clip so you can just see it simmering away. And other than that, we will be back in about 3 hours to see if it's reduced enough. The stock or broth, you'll see that I use those 2 words interchangeably, either stock or broth. But I guess officially it should be called a stock. It went to the full boil. I turned it down to low, and it's just starting to get its boil. It'll get a little bit stronger, and it's going to do this for 3 hours. A few little things that I wanted to add in. If you're using the celery and it comes up and there's leaves on there, cut the leaves off. Don't put that in your stock. Leaves, especially if they have any kind of yellow on there, can really get a bitter flavor when because it cooks so long on the stove or at high temperatures. Celery leaves can get real bitter. So just don't use celery leaves. When you're cutting up your chicken versus your vegetables, always use a different cutting board. Don't ever cut your vegetables on a board that you use for meats. Remember to take all those skins of the onions, the ends of your celery and carrots, throw those in your compost pile. Don't throw them in your trash can. Reuse those. At this point, you could put some herbs in here. I choose not to on a chicken stock. On a beef stock, that's a whole different ball game. I believe that it's better to add the herbs when you're actually making something with your stock. Because if you add different kinds of herbs and then you go to use part of that and those herbs don't match what you're cooking, it can really conflict with taste. So it's just better not to add your herbs right now. So this is just gonna simmer for at least 3 hours. So I am going to be back in 3 hours and we'll just be able to see how much that reduced. It's been about 3.5 hours and my stock is ready to go through some cheesecloth. If you didn't have cheesecloth, you could actually use coffee filters, especially if you had the really large ones, probably 2 or 3 layers of coffee filters. I actually have 4 layers of cheesecloth here. It's resting over top of my strainer and then it's in a very large stainless steel bowl. You could just dump it in, but any great agitation makes your broth less and less clear. So you're much better ladling it in. Now, as you can see, the chicken is just totally falling apart. And I will take that and when it cools down a little bit off the bone, and I'll use that chicken meat. I'll actually take all the vegetables and I'll be able to use those. I can add those to different things I'm cooking. So none of it goes to waste. It doesn't take long to strain through the cheesecloth. Now the next trick to do is you want to cool this as fast as possible. You could put the bowl in a refrigerator. It's winter time, so I could put it in the garage. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to cover it with a towel and I'm going to place it outside. It's cold outside today, colder than what my refrigerator is. And so I might as well take advantage of that cold weather. Let's look at some of the stock. Beautiful, just beautiful. The aroma is wonderful. And I'm just going to continue to scoop this in. And then I'll show it to you after I let it drain for a little bit. Now it's ready to go outside. If you had a large lid, you might be tempted to put the lid on there. But that holds the heat in there, and I want it to cool as quickly as possible. So I'm going to put just a dish towel over top of it, set it outside. It's in a large bowl, so the air distribution can cool it down very quickly. And then I have everything sitting in the strainer on top of the original pot. So if there's anything else that drains out, I'll be able to capture that. The chicken stock is all completely cooled down. So I'm going to undo my towel. I had tied it on the corner so that nothing, no dust or anything could get in there. And then once again, I'm just going to ladle it in. And it's completely done. Now I wouldn't can this. When you can it, it would go to such a high temperature. I find it much better. I'll save some of it in the fridge that I'll be using this week, and the other part I'll put in a Tupperware container and put it in the freezer, so that when I'm done with this batch, I can once again start another batch. Isn't that a beautiful stock? This is a very easy chicken stock to make. And it really doesn't take a lot of time. I mean, of course, it's simmering for 3 hours, but you can do other things like, during that time. So I think it's just a perfect chicken stock for anybody to try. So this is Sandy at Apple Cottage. I hope you have a great day. Make yourself some chicken stock. And like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Thanks so much.